The day finally came when the hybrid treatment was ready for its first real-world test. The tension in the air was palpable, a mix of anticipation and dread that clung to every corner of the medical facility. Dr. Emily Carter stood at the center of it all, her hands steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She had spent countless hours refining the formula, consulting with Valith scientists and running simulations to ensure its safety. But now, as she prepared to administer it to a group of critically ill Valith, she couldn't shake the feeling that everything rested on this moment. Kyle, the young Valith who had become a symbol of hope for both species, was among the patients selected for the trial. His condition had stabilized since Emily's initial intervention, but he remained weak, his glow dimmer than it should have been. Laura Simmons, who had grown close to him over the past weeks, stood nearby, her expression a mixture of worry and determination. "He's strong," she said softly, more to herself than anyone else. "He'll pull through." Emily nodded, though she didn't trust herself to speak. Instead, she focused on the task at hand, double-checking the dosage and ensuring the equipment was functioning properly. Beside her, Dr. Ryan Bennett monitored the readings from a portable scanner, his eyes darting between the screen and the patients lying before them. Captain Daniel Hayes lingered near the doorway, keeping watch over the room while maintaining radio contact with the Odyssey. Everyone had a role to play, and no one dared to step out of sync. Counselor Zinara watched silently from the sidelines, her presence calm yet commanding. Though she showed no outward signs of anxiety, Emily could sense the weight of expectation pressing down on her. This wasn't just about saving lives. It was about proving to her people that trusting humanity was the right decision. If the treatment failed, the fragile alliance they had built would crumble, leaving both species vulnerable to whatever forces had unleashed the plague. With a deep breath, Emily approached the first patient, a Valith elder whose once brilliant glow had faded to a faint flicker. She administered the treatment carefully, injecting the hybrid compound directly into the energy conduit that served as their circulatory system. The process was slow and deliberate, each movement precise. Once finished, she stepped back, allowing Ryan to monitor the patient's response. Minutes passed, then an hour. At first, nothing seemed to change. The elder's glow remained dim, his form still and lifeless. Emily felt her heart sink, doubts creeping in like shadows. Had they made a mistake? Was the treatment ineffective? Just as she began to lose hope, a subtle shift occurred. The elder's glow brightened slightly, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. A collective gasp rippled through the room as everyone realized what was happening. The treatment was working. Encouraged by this success, Emily moved on to the next patient, then the next, administering the compound with growing confidence. Each time the results were the same, a gradual strengthening of their glow, a sign that their bodies were fighting back against the virus. By the time she reached Kyle, the atmosphere in the room had shifted entirely. Hope replaced fear, and determination supplanted despair. As Emily injected the treatment into Kyle, Laura knelt beside him, holding his translucent hand in hers. "You've got this, buddy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. For a moment, there was no response. Then, slowly but surely, Kyle's glow began to brighten. His small form stirred, and he opened his eyes, gazing up at Laura with a look of wonder. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental, a testament to what could be achieved when two vastly different species work together. The success of the trial sent ripples of excitement throughout the facility. News spread quickly, drawing crowds of Valith who gathered outside the lab to witness the miracle unfolding within. Counselor Zunera addressed her people, her mental voice resonating with pride and gratitude. "Today we have seen proof of what unity can accomplish," she declared. "These humans whom we once feared have shown us compassion and ingenuity. Let this be a turning point in our history." Her words sparked a wave of optimism among the Valith. Many who had previously doubted the humans' intentions now approached them with curiosity and respect. Some even offered assistance, volunteering to help produce more of the treatment or care for those still recovering. The divide between human and alien began to blur, replaced by a shared sense of purpose. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Producing the treatment on a large scale proved difficult. The resources required were extensive, and the delicate balance between human and Veilith components left little room for error. Mistakes during production led to several batches being unusable, forcing the team to start over multiple times. Frustration mounted, but so did resilience. Emily and Ryan worked tirelessly, refining their methods and streamlining the process. Laura coordinated logistics, ensuring supplies were delivered efficiently, while Daniel maintained order and morale, reminding everyone of why they were here. Amid the chaos, moments of connection continued to strengthen the bond between the humans and the Veilith. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Laura found herself sitting with Cale in a quiet corner of the facility. He had recovered enough to move around, though his strength was still limited. Together, they looked out at the shimmering landscape of Velos, its crystalline structures glowing softly under the twin moons. "Do you think your world will ever feel safe again?" Laura asked, her tone gentle. Cale tilted his head, considering her question. After a pause, he replied telepathically, his thoughts forming clear images in her mind. He showed her visions of Velos restored, its oceans of liquid light pulsing brightly, its spires humming with energy, its people radiant and whole. It was a future worth fighting for. Laura smiled, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "We'll get there," she promised. "Together." Meanwhile, Emily and Ryan faced another challenge, understanding the true nature of the virus. Ryan's earlier theory, that the pathogen might have been engineered, continued to haunt them. They analyzed samples from treated patients, searching for clues that might confirm or refute the idea. What they discovered was both alarming and enlightening. Embedded within the virus's genetic code were fragments of sequences unlike anything found in nature. These sequences appeared designed to target specific biological markers unique to the Veilith, suggesting that the virus had indeed been crafted with malicious intent. The implications were staggering. If the virus was man-made, or rather, alien-made, then the plague wasn't just a random catastrophe. It was an act of war, deliberately unleashed to weaken or destroy the Veilith. The question was, who was responsible? And why? Emily brought the findings to Counselor Zenara, knowing it would be a difficult conversation. The Veilith leader listened intently, her glow dimming slightly as she absorbed the information. When Emily finished speaking, Zenara remained silent for a long moment, her thoughts hidden behind an unreadable expression. Finally, she spoke, her mental voice heavy with resolve. "If this is true, then we are facing not just a disease, but an enemy, one that seeks to exploit our weaknesses and divide us. We must prepare for the possibility of further attacks." Though the revelation cast a shadow over their recent successes, it also solidified the alliance between humans and Veilith. Both species recognized the need to stand united against whoever, or whatever, had orchestrated the plague. Plans were drawn up to investigate its origins, combining human investigative techniques with Veilith technology. The mission expanded beyond curing the disease. It became a quest for justice and survival. As the days turned into weeks, the team pushed forward with renewed determination. They scaled up production of the treatment, treating hundreds of Veilith daily. Recovery rates improved steadily, and the once overcrowded wards began to empty. Smiles returned to faces, both human and alien, as hope took root once more. Yet beneath the surface, questions lingered. Who had created the virus? Why had they targeted the Veilith? And what other dangers might lie waiting in the vastness of space? These mysteries weighed heavily on everyone's minds, but they refused to let fear dictate their actions. Instead, they focused on what mattered most: healing, rebuilding, and forging a future where cooperation triumphed over conflict. In the end, the battle against the plague was far from over. But for the first time since arriving on Velos, the humans and Veilith faced it not as adversaries but as allies. Together, they proved that even in the darkest moments, light could shine through. If only they dared to believe in each other. The horizon shook violently as it descended through Earth's turbulent atmosphere. Jack gripped the controls tightly, his knuckles white against the dim glow of the cockpit lights. Clara sat beside him, her eyes fixed on the monitor displaying jagged readings from the shuttle's sensors. Outside, the view was nothing short of apocalyptic. The sky churned with thick clouds streaked with veins of lightning, while below, the landscape shifted between barren wastelands and dense forests glowing faintly under the haze. "It's worse than I imagined," Jack muttered, trying to steady the shuttle as another gust of wind slammed into its hull. He glanced at Clara, who looked pale but determined. "You sure about this?" Clara didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned closer to the monitor, studying the shapes moving across the ground far below them. Some were small and darted erratically, like insects the size of cars. Others were larger, their forms hazy but unmistakably alive. Whatever they were, they moved with purpose, not random chaos. Finally, she turned to Jack. "We didn't come all this way to turn back now." Jack nodded, though his stomach twisted, with unease. He knew she was right. They had risked everything to reach Earth, and now that they were here, there was no going back. Still, the sight of those creatures, and the knowledge that they might encounter more up close, was enough to make anyone hesitate. As the shuttle broke through the lower layers of the atmosphere, the turbulence began to ease. Below them, stretched, a vast expanse of forest unlike anything either of them had ever seen. Towering trees rose high into the misty air, their trunks covered in luminous fungi that pulsed softly with light. Vines as thick as cables snaked between branches, and the ground was hidden beneath a thick carpet of moss and strange fleshy plants. It was alien, yet strangely beautiful, a world reclaimed by nature after centuries of neglect. "Where do we land?" Clara asked, breaking the silence. Jack scanned the terrain for a safe spot. Most of the area was too densely packed with vegetation to even consider setting down, but eventually he spotted a clearing near the edge of the forest. It wasn't perfect. Patches of ash and scorched earth suggested recent activity, but it would have to do. "We'll try there," he said, pointing to the clearing. "Keep an eye out for movement." The shuttle touched down with a soft thud, kicking up clouds of dust and ash. For a moment, neither Jack nor Clara moved. They sat in silence, listening to the hum of the engines winding down and the distant rumble of thunder overhead. Then, slowly, they unbuckled their harnesses and grabbed their gear. Before stepping outside, Jack double-checked the environmental suits they'd brought along. Even with advanced filtration systems, Earth's air was toxic, a deadly cocktail of chemicals and radiation left over from centuries of environmental collapse. Without protection, they wouldn't last more than a few minutes. "Ready?" Jack asked, pulling on his helmet. "As ready as I'll ever be," Clara replied, her voice steady despite the tension in her posture. They opened the shuttle's hatch and stepped out onto the surface of Earth for the first time. The air smelled wrong, not just bad, but unnatural, like burning plastic mixed with rotting vegetation. The ground beneath their boots crunched with every step, brittle and dry. Despite the eerie atmosphere, Clara couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. This was Earth, the planet her ancestors had abandoned generations ago, and somehow, life still clung to it. They hadn't gone far when they noticed something odd. Scattered around the clearing were piles of bones, some large enough to belong to animals the size of elephants. But these weren't ordinary skeletons. Many of the bones were fused together in strange ways, twisted and deformed as if they had been reshaped by some unseen force. Others were covered in patches of hardened material that looked almost like bark. "What happened here?" Clara whispered, crouching down to examine one of the larger skulls. Its shape was vaguely familiar but distorted, like a wolf, only bigger and with elongated jaws filled with razor-sharp teeth. "I don't know," Jack admitted, scanning the area nervously. "But whatever did this isn't friendly." As if, on cue, a low growl echoed through the forest. Both Jack and Clara froze, their hearts pounding. Slowly, Jack reached for the plasma cutter slung across his back. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was better than nothing. Clara followed suit, pulling out a compact stunner designed for self-defense. The growl grew louder, accompanied by the sound of snapping twigs and rustling leaves. From the shadows of the trees emerged a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It stood nearly 10 feet tall, its body covered in matted fur and patches of glowing fungus. Its eyes glowed faintly in the dim light, and its mouth was lined with rows of jagged teeth. Long clawed arms hung low to the ground, and its movements were unnervingly fast. "Stay calm," Jack whispered, raising the plasma cutter. "Don't provoke it." The creature sniffed the air, its head tilting slightly as it studied them. For a moment it seemed uncertain, almost curious. Then, without warning, it lunged forward with terrifying speed. "Move!" Jack shouted, firing a burst of energy from the cutter. The beam struck the creature's shoulder, leaving a smoking wound but not slowing it down. Clara fired her stunner, hitting it square in the chest. The creature stumbled briefly, dazed, before shaking off the effects and charging again. "Run!" Clara yelled, turning toward the shuttle. But Jack hesitated, keeping his aim steady as he fired another shot. This time the beam hit the creature's leg, causing it to collapse with a deafening roar. Seizing the opportunity, Jack sprinted, after Clara, both of them diving into the shuttle just as the creature regained its footing. "Go, go, go!" Clara shouted, slamming the hatch shut behind them. Jack wasted no time powering up the engines and lifting off. As the shuttle rose into the air, they watched through the viewport as the wounded creature let out one final guttural scream before disappearing back into the forest. Neither of them spoke for several minutes, adrenaline coursing through their veins. When Jack finally broke the silence, his voice was shaky. That wasn't natural." "No kidding," Clara replied, still breathing heavily. "Whatever it is, it's not just surviving, it's thriving." As they flew higher, putting distance between themselves and the forest, they noticed something else. Beyond the trees, carved into the side of a nearby mountain, was an entrance, a massive archway leading deep underground. Lights flickered faintly within, suggesting signs of habitation. "There," Clara said, pointing to the structure. "That has to be where the transmission came from." Jack nodded, steering the shuttle toward the opening. "Let's hope whoever's down there is friendlier than what we just met." The shuttle landed gently inside the cavernous tunnel, its beams illuminating walls covered in intricate carvings and symbols. Some looked ancient, remnants of humanity's past, while others appeared newer, almost organic in design. As they stepped out cautiously, weapons drawn, they realized they weren't alone. From the shadows emerged a group of figures, their faces obscured by masks made of woven fibers and glowing fungi. Their clothing was patched together from scraps of fabric and leather, reinforced with pieces of metal and bone. At first glance, they looked primitive, but their movements were deliberate and disciplined. One of them stepped forward, lowering his mask to reveal a weathered face marked with scars. His hair was streaked with gray, and his eyes carried a weight of years spent enduring hardship. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice gravelly but firm. "And why have you come to Cascadia?" Jack exchanged a glance with Clara before answering. "My name is Jack Wilson, and this is Clara Bennett. We're from the colony ship Elysium. We intercepted a transmission from Earth." The man studied them for a long moment, then nodded. "I am Caleb Rivers. You've found us. Now tell me, what do you want?" Clara took a step forward, her tone respectful but urgent. "We want to understand. How have you survived here? What happened to Earth?" Caleb's expression softened slightly, though his gaze remained wary. "Survival comes at a cost," he said cryptically. "Come with me, and I will show you." He led them deeper into the tunnels, which widened into a sprawling underground settlement. Here people moved about their daily lives, tending to crops grown under artificial lights, repairing tools, and caring for children. The air smelled damp but clean, filtered through some kind of advanced system integrated into the cave walls. Everywhere they looked, they saw evidence of adaptation, humans living in harmony with technology and biology alike. This is incredible, Clara murmured, taking in the scene. How is this possible? Caleb stopped walking and turned to face them. Not everyone left Earth during the Exodus, he explained. Some of us stayed behind, hiding in places like this. Over time, we learned to adapt, to use the very mutations that destroyed this world to our advantage. He gestured to a woman passing by, her skin tinged with a faint green hue. She smiled warmly at Jack and Clara before continuing on her way. Symbiosis, Caleb continued. We've bonded with organisms created during the collapse. They protect us from radiation, filter toxins from the air, and even enhance our strength and endurance. Jack stared at him, struggling to process what he was hearing. You mean, you're part human, part whatever mutated out there? In a way, yes, Caleb admitted. It's not easy. Every generation faces new challenges, new dangers. But it's how we've survived. Clara looked around, marveling at the resilient. Jack and Clara followed Caleb deeper into the underground settlement, their footsteps echoing softly against the stone walls. The air grew cooler as they moved further from the entrance, and the faint hum of machinery blended with the murmur of voices. People passed by, some nodding politely at Jack and Clara, while others watched them with cautious eyes. It was clear that outsiders were rare here, and perhaps unwelcome. Caleb led them to a large chamber carved out of the rock. In the center stood a circular table made of salvaged metal and wood, surrounded by stools. Along the walls, shelves overflowed with books, scrolls, and digital tablets, remnants of humanity's past knowledge stored in whatever form had survived. A soft glow came from bioluminescent fungi embedded in the ceiling, casting an eerie but comforting light over the room. Sit, Caleb said, gesturing toward the table. We have much to discuss. Jack hesitated before sitting down, his mind racing with questions. Clara, however, wasted no time diving in. You mentioned factions earlier, she began. What did you mean? Are there others like you who don't want peace? Caleb leaned back slightly, his expression thoughtful. Not all of us agree on how to move forward, he admitted. Some believe we should remain hidden, preserving what little we have left. Others think it's time to reclaim our place among the stars, even if it means fighting for it. And which side are you on? Jack asked, his tone guarded. I lead those who wish to survive without bloodshed, Caleb replied. But my position is not popular with everyone. There is one man in particular, Victor Kane, who sees me as weak. He believes humanity's future lies in domination, not coexistence. Clara frowned. Domination? Over who? The colonies? Caleb nodded. Victor dreams of overthrowing the off-world colonies and claiming their resources for Earth. He thinks they abandoned us when we needed them most, and now he wants revenge. But his methods, they are dangerous, unpredictable. Jack glanced at Clara, then back at Caleb. If he's so powerful, why hasn't he taken control already? Because I stand in his way, Caleb said simply. For now, at least. But Victor grows bolder every day, and your arrival may give him the excuse he needs to act. The weight of Caleb's words settled heavily over the group. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his seat, realizing just how precarious their situation was. They hadn't come here looking for trouble, yet trouble seemed determined to find them. What about the transmission we picked up? Clara asked, steering the conversation back to their original purpose. Was that sent by you or someone else? Caleb shook his head. It wasn't us. We stopped broadcasting signals years ago. It was too risky. Someone else must have sent it, someone who wanted to be found. Could it be Victor? Jack suggested. It's possible, Caleb admitted. Or it could be someone else entirely. There are other groups out there scattered across the surface. Some are allies, others enemies. Without knowing more, it's hard to say. Clara leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. How many groups are there, and how do you communicate with each other? We don't, Caleb said bluntly. Communication invites interception. Instead, we rely on runners, messengers who travel between settlements carrying information. It's slow, but it works. Jack rubbed his temples, feeling overwhelmed. Everything about this place was unfamiliar, from its strange blend of technology and biology to the complex web of alliances and rivalries. "So what happens now?" he asked finally. "Do you plan to send us away?" Caleb studied him for a moment, his gaze steady. "No," he said after a pause. "You're here now, whether by accident or design. That means something. Perhaps fate brought you to us. Or perhaps it's a test. Either way, I won't turn you away." Relief washed over Jack, though he knew staying wouldn't be easy. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that they had stumbled into something far bigger than themselves. Later that evening, Caleb introduced Jack and Clara to Rachel Moore, a scientist working in the settlement's research lab. Her workspace was cluttered with tools, vials, and half-finished experiments, but there was a method to the madness. Shelves lined with jars containing glowing samples dominated one wall, while another held stacks of handwritten notes and diagrams. Rachel greeted them warmly, her smile genuine despite the fatigue etched into her face. She was younger than Caleb, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. "You two must have a lot of questions," she said, motioning for them to sit. "Ask away." Clara didn't need to be told twice. "How did you adapt to living here? I mean, surviving on Earth seems impossible." Rachel chuckled dryly. "It almost was. When the collapse happened, most of us died. Those who didn't had to change, or die trying. We started experimenting with symbiotes, organisms that could bond with our bodies and help us endure the environment. At first it was messy. Many didn't survive the process, but over generations we refined it. Now nearly everyone here has some kind of symbiotic partner." She pointed to a jar on the shelf containing a small, pulsating creature that resembled a jellyfish. "This is one example. It produces enzymes that neutralize toxins in the bloodstream. Another helps filter radiation. Together they keep us alive." Jack stared at the jar, both fascinated and uneasy. "And these creatures? They evolved naturally, or were they created?" "Both," Rachel replied. "Some existed before the collapse, altered by human interference. Others were engineered during desperate attempts to fix the damage. The result is unpredictable, sometimes beautiful, sometimes monstrous." Her words reminded Jack of the creature they had encountered earlier, the towering beast with glowing fungus growing on its fur. "Is that why the surface is so dangerous? Because of mutations?" Rachel nodded. "Exactly. The collapse unleashed forces we couldn't control. Animals, plants, even microorganisms, they all changed. Some became predators. Others adapted in ways we still don't fully understand." Clara frowned. "But why stay here? Why not leave Earth and join the colonies?" Rachel sighed, her expression somber. "Because we can't. Not anymore. Our bodies are tied to this world now. Remove us from Earth and the symbiotes begin to fail. We die within days. This planet may be harsh, but it's also home. For better or worse, we belong here." The gravity of her statement hung in the air. Jack and Clara exchanged glances, understanding now just how trapped these people truly were. They weren't just survivors. They were prisoners of their own biology. As the days passed, Jack and Clara settled into a routine within the settlement. They helped where they could, learning about the daily challenges faced by its inhabitants. Clara spent hours in Rachel's lab, poring over data and asking endless questions. Jack, meanwhile, worked alongside Caleb and others repairing tools and fortifying defenses. Despite the warmth shown by many residents, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Whispers of Victor Kane's growing influence reached their ears, fueling unease. Several times Jack caught glimpses of armed guards patrolling the tunnels, their presence a reminder of the fragile balance holding the community together. One evening, as Jack and Clara sat near the main fire pit sharing a meal with Caleb, a runner arrived, breathless and covered in dirt. "Victor's men," he gasped. "They've been spotted near the eastern tunnel. They're planning something." Caleb's jaw tightened. "How many?" At least a dozen, the runner replied. Maybe more. Caleb stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the stone floor. Gather the council. We need to decide our next move. Jack and Clara exchanged worried looks. Whatever Victor had planned, it couldn't be good. As Caleb strode off to address the threat, Clara turned to Jack. Do you think we should get involved? Jack hesitated. I don't know, these aren't our fights. But if Victor succeeds, he could destroy everything Caleb's worked for, Clara finished grimly. They both knew what was at stake. If Victor gained control, it wouldn't just mean danger for the settlement. It could mean disaster for humanity itself. Earth might be a death world, but it was also proof that life could endure even the harshest conditions. Losing that hope would be unthinkable. As they prepared to follow Caleb, Jack felt a surge of determination. They had come to Earth seeking answers, but now they had a choice to make: stand aside and watch history repeat itself, or fight to protect the fragile spark of survival they had found. Neither option promised safety. But as they stepped into the flickering shadows of the tunnels, Jack realized something important. Humanity's story wasn't written in the stars. It was forged in the struggles of those brave enough to face the unknown. And maybe, just maybe, they could help write a new chapter. The council chamber was tense, the air thick with unease. Caleb stood at the head of the table, his hands resting on its surface as he addressed the gathered leaders. Jack and Clara sat quietly in the corner, observing the discussion unfold. The room was dimly lit by glowing fungi embedded in the walls, casting soft shadows that danced across the faces of those present. Each person wore an expression of worry, their eyes darting between Caleb and the runner who had delivered the news about Victor's men. We can't ignore this, one of the council members said, her voice sharp with urgency. If Victor attacks, we won't have time to prepare. He'll strike when we're weakest. Caleb nodded grimly. I agree, but rushing into action without a plan will only make things worse. We need to know what he's after, and why now. Another council member leaned forward, his tone cautious. It could be because of them. He gestured toward Jack and Clara, his gaze lingering on them for a moment before returning to Caleb. Their arrival might have given Victor the excuse he needed to act. He could claim they're spies sent by the colonies to weaken us. Jack stiffened, guilt creeping into his chest. He hadn't considered that their presence might put the settlement in danger. Clara noticed his discomfort and placed a reassuring hand on his arm, though her own expression was troubled. They're not spies, Caleb said firmly, cutting off any further speculation. They came here seeking answers, not trouble. If anything, they've reminded us of something important. Humanity still has ties to the stars. Whether we like it or not, Earth isn't alone anymore. The council fell silent, the weight of Caleb's words sinking in. For years, the survivors had lived in isolation, clinging to the belief that hiding was their best chance at survival. Now, with outsiders in their midst and Victor threatening conflict, that belief was being tested. Even so, another voice chimed in. We can't afford to take risks. If Victor succeeds, it won't just be our lives at stake. It'll be everything we've built here. Caleb sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. Then we prepare. Double the patrols around the tunnels. Make sure everyone knows what's coming. And if Victor wants a fight, his voice hardened, we'll give him one. Later that night, Jack and Clara were invited to join Caleb and Rachel in a smaller meeting room. The mood was less formal but no less serious. Maps of the settlement and surrounding areas were spread out across the table, marked with red circles indicating potential entry points for Victor's forces. You two don't owe us anything, Caleb began, looking directly at Jack and Clara. But if you choose to stay and help, we won't turn you away. Jack hesitated, glancing at Clara. They had come to Earth looking for answers, not to get caught up in a local power struggle. But seeing how hard these people worked to survive, and how much they stood to lose, made walking away seem impossible. We're staying, Clara said decisively. Whatever happens, we'll do what we can. Caleb gave a small nod of gratitude. Good, because we're going to need all the help we can get. Rachel stepped forward, pointing to one of the maps. Victor's men are likely approaching from the eastern tunnel. It's the most direct route, but also the easiest to defend. If we fortify it properly, we can hold them off long enough to figure out their next move. What about traps? Jack asked, leaning closer to study the map. Could we set some up along the way? Slow them down or split them up? Rachel smiled faintly. Not a bad idea. We've got access to old tech scavenged from the surface. Explosives, tripwires, even automated turrets. With your engineering skills, you might be able to rig something effective. Jack felt a flicker of pride at the compliment. For the first time since arriving on Earth, he felt useful, not just as an outsider, but as part of the team. I'll start working on it right away. Clara turned to Caleb. What about diplomacy? Is there any chance of talking to Victor? Before things escalate? Caleb shook his head. Victor doesn't listen to reason, he sees compromise as weakness. If we try to negotiate, he'll use it against us. Then we focus on defense, Clara said, her tone resolute. She looked at Rachel. Is there anything I can do to help? Rachel thought for a moment, then nodded. Actually, yes. Some of our symbiotes are showing signs of stress. They're reacting to the tension in the settlement. If you could assist me in calming them, it would make a big difference. A stressed symbiote can cause problems for its host. Clara agreed immediately, eager to contribute in any way she could. As the group dispersed to carry out their tasks, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that they were preparing for something far bigger than a simple skirmish. This wasn't just about defending the settlement, it was about protecting hope itself. Over. The next few days, the entire community sprang into action. Guards patrolled the tunnels, their weapons ready. Engineers like Jack worked tirelessly to reinforce barriers and set up traps. Meanwhile, Clara spent hours in Rachel's lab, learning how to care for the symbiotic organisms that kept the settlers alive. Though she found the creatures fascinating, she couldn't help but feel uneasy about their reliance on them. What would happen if the symbiotes failed? Would these people ever truly be free? As preparations continued, tensions within the settlement grew. Arguments broke out over strategy, supplies ran low, and tempers flared. Through it all, Caleb remained a steady presence, reminding everyone of what was at stake. This isn't just about us, he told them during one particularly heated debate. It's about proving that humanity can adapt, survive, and thrive, even in the harshest conditions. If we fall, we take that hope with us. His words resonated deeply, giving the settlers a renewed sense of purpose. Even Jack and Clara felt more connected to the community. Despite having only arrived recently, they weren't just fighting for themselves, they were fighting for the future. Finally, the day came when the scouts reported Victor's men closing in. The eastern tunnel was fortified, traps laid, and defenses ready. Everyone took their positions, hearts pounding with anticipation. Jack stood near the entrance, monitoring the sensors he had installed. Clara stayed close to Rachel, ensuring the symbiotes remained stable under pressure. Hours passed in tense silence. Then, just as exhaustion began to set in, the alarms blared. Jack's screen lit up with movement readings. "They're here!" he shouted, gripping his plasma cutter tightly. The first wave of attackers appeared moments later, their forms silhouetted by the dim light of the tunnel. They moved cautiously, wary of traps. When the first explosion went off, sending debris flying and scattering the invaders, cheers erupted from the defenders. But the battle was far from over. Victor's men regrouped quickly, pressing forward, with relentless determination. Shots rang out, echoing through the cavernous tunnels. Jack fired his weapon repeatedly, each blast striking true. Beside him, Caleb wielded a modified energy rifle with deadly precision, his face a mask of concentration. Amid the chaos, Clara noticed something alarming. One of the symbiotes in a nearby settler began to glow brighter, its movements erratic. The host doubled over in pain, clutching their chest. Without hesitation, Clara rushed to their side, administering a sedative Rachel had prepared earlier. Within moments, the symbiote calmed, and the settler regained their footing, gratitude shining in their eyes. As the fight dragged on, it became clear that neither side would back down easily. Victor's men were well armed and disciplined, but the defenders had the advantage of familiarity with the terrain. Traps continued to slow the attackers, and the narrow tunnels made it difficult for them to maneuver effectively. Then suddenly, a loud roar echoed through the tunnels, a sound that froze everyone in place. From the shadows emerged one of the massive mutated creatures Jack and Clara had encountered earlier. Its glowing fungus pulsed with an angry red hue, and its claws gleamed menacingly in the dim light. "It's been lured here," someone shouted, panic rising in their voice. "Victor must have planned this." The creature charged forward, indiscriminately attacking both sides. In the confusion, Victor's men began retreating, unwilling to risk further casualties. Caleb seized the opportunity, rallying his people to push forward and secure the tunnel. When the dust finally settled, the defenders stood victorious, but at a cost. Several settlers had been injured, and parts of the tunnel were left in ruins. Exhausted but relieved, the group gathered to assess the damage. Caleb approached Jack and Clara, his expression weary but grateful. "You two saved us today," he said simply. "Without your help, we wouldn't have held the line." Jack shook his head modestly. "We're just glad we could do something." Clara smiled faintly, though her thoughts lingered on the creature and the destruction it had caused. "What happens now? Will Victor try again?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "He will. But next time we'll be ready. And maybe, just maybe, we'll find a way to end this without more bloodshed." As the survivors began cleaning up the aftermath, Jack and Clara exchanged a glance. They had come to Earth seeking answers, but instead they had found purpose. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they wouldn't face them alone. Together, they had taken their first steps toward becoming part of something greater. A fragile, yet unyielding beacon of hope in a world that refused to die. The aftermath of the battle left the settlement tense but resolute. Though they had managed to repel Victor's forces, the victory felt hollow. The defenders had lost friends and neighbors in the fight, and the scars on the tunnels served as grim reminders of how close they had come to disaster. Jack and Clara walked through the damaged areas, helping where they could. Clara tended to the wounded alongside Rachel, while Jack assisted with repairs, his engineering skills proving invaluable. Despite the exhaustion weighing heavily on everyone, Caleb called another meeting in the council chamber. This time the atmosphere was different, more somber, more urgent. The settlers sat quietly, their faces etched with worry and determination. Caleb stood at the head of the table, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a steely resolve. "We held them off," he began, his voice firm but tinged with sadness. "But we all know this isn't over. Victor won't stop until he gets what he wants, or until we stop him for good." A murmur rippled through the room, but no one spoke up. They knew Caleb was right. Victor's attack had been brutal, and the appearance of the mutated creature had only made things worse. It was clear that Victor was willing to use anything and anyone to achieve his goals. Caleb continued, his gaze sweeping across the room. "We need to understand why he's doing this, what drives him. Without knowing that, we're just reacting, not planning. And reacting won't save us in the long run." Rachel stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "There might be a way to find out." Before the collapse, there were research facilities scattered across Earth. Some of them studied the mutations, the very changes that created those creatures we saw today. If we can access one of those facilities, we might learn more about Victor's plans and maybe even find a way to counteract them. Jack frowned, leaning forward slightly. "You mean go back to the surface after everything we've seen out there?" Rachel nodded. "Yes. It's risky, but it's our best chance. One of the closest facilities is buried under kilometers of ice in the northern region. It's called Gaia Station. It was abandoned centuries ago, but its systems may still hold valuable data." Clara looked at Rachel, her curiosity piqued. "What kind of data are we talking about?" "Everything," Rachel replied. "Genetic blueprints, environmental logs, experimental records. If Victor has been using mutated creatures as weapons, there's a good chance he's drawing from the same knowledge base. Understanding his tools could give us an edge." Caleb crossed his arms, considering the proposal. How do we get there? The surface is dangerous, and we don't have much in the way of transportation. I can help with that, Jack said, surprising even himself. All eyes turned to him, and he cleared his throat before continuing. The horizon is still operational. If we modify it for cold weather, we might be able to reach the station. It won't be easy, but it's possible. Caleb studied Jack for a moment, then nodded slowly. All right. But we can't send just anyone. This mission will require people who can handle themselves and each other. I'm going, Clara said immediately, her tone leaving no room for argument. I want to see what's in that facility. Maybe I can make sense of the science behind it. Caleb glanced at Jack, who hesitated briefly before nodding. I'll go too. Someone needs to keep the shuttle running, and besides, I started this. I should finish it. Rachel raised a hand slightly, catching Caleb's attention. I should join them. My expertise could be crucial in deciphering whatever we find. Caleb sighed, rubbing his temples. He didn't like the idea of sending 3 key members of the settlement into such danger, but he knew they were right. This was their best shot at understanding and stopping Victor. Fine, he said finally. But you'll need protection. I'll assign 2 guards to accompany you. No arguments. The days leading up to the mission passed quickly. Jack worked tirelessly on the horizon, reinforcing its hull and installing extra heating units to withstand the freezing temperatures they would face. Clara spent hours reviewing old files and notes Rachel had salvaged from previous generations, trying to piece together what they might encounter at Gaia Station. Meanwhile, Rachel prepared medical supplies and equipment, ensuring they would be ready for any emergencies. On the morning of their departure, the entire settlement gathered to see them off. Caleb stood near the shuttle, his expression unreadable. As Jack, Clara, Rachel, and the 2 guards boarded the horizon, he approached the hatch. Bring back something we can use, he said, his voice low but steady. And bring yourselves back. We need you here. Jack nodded solemnly. We'll do our best. With that, the shuttle lifted off, rising steadily into the air. Below them, the settlement grew smaller and smaller, until it disappeared beneath the dense canopy of glowing trees. Ahead lay the vast expanse of Earth's surface, a world both beautiful and deadly. The journey to the northern region was grueling. The horizon battled fierce winds and icy storms, its engines straining against the elements. Inside, the team huddled together, wrapped in thermal blankets and sipping hot drinks brewed from powdered rations. Conversation was sparse. The weight of their mission hung over them like a storm cloud. Finally, after hours of travel, they reached the coordinates Rachel had provided. The landscape below was a frozen wasteland, blanketed in snow and ice. Rising from the frost was a massive structure, a dome partially buried beneath layers of ice. Its surface was cracked and weathered, but faint lights flickered within, suggesting that some systems were still active. That's it, Rachel said, pointing to the structure. Gaia Station. Jack guided the shuttle down carefully, landing on a relatively flat patch of ice near the entrance. As they stepped out, the biting cold hit them like a wall. Even through their insulated suits, the chill seeped into their bones. The guards moved ahead cautiously, scanning the area for threats. The entrance to the station was sealed shut, its metal doors crusted with ice. Jack set to work immediately, using a plasma torch to melt away the frost and expose the control panel. After a few minutes of tinkering, the doors groaned open, revealing a dark corridor beyond. Stay alert, one of the guards warned, raising his weapon. We don't know what's waiting for us inside. The group moved cautiously into the station, their footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. The air smelled stale, tinged with the metallic tang of rust and decay. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the walls, casting long shadows that danced unnervingly in their wake. As they explored deeper, they found evidence of the station's former purpose. Laboratories lined the corridors, their equipment covered in dust and cobwebs. Monitors displayed static-filled screens, and papers littered the floors yellowed with age. Clara picked up one of the documents, squinting at the faded text. "This is incredible," she murmured. They were experimenting with genetic modification on a massive scale. These notes describe creating organisms capable of surviving extreme conditions. But they also mention unintended side effects, mutations they couldn't control. Rachel joined her, examining another stack of papers. It's like they opened Pandora's box. Once these experiments got loose, there was no putting them back. Jack paused by a large machine in the center of one lab. Its design was unfamiliar, but its purpose seemed clear. It was meant to analyze biological samples. "Do you think this thing still works?" he asked, brushing away a layer of grime. "It's worth a try," Rachel replied. "If we can power it up, we might be able to extract information directly from the samples stored here." While Jack and Rachel focused on reviving the machine, Clara wandered into an adjacent room. Her breath caught as she saw what lay inside. A series of cryogenic pods, their glass surfaces fogged with frost. She wiped one clean and peered inside, her stomach twisting at the sight. A human figure floated suspended in green liquid, its skin pale and translucent. Tubes connected it to the pod, feeding nutrients and oxygen into its body. "Guys," Clara called softly, her voice trembling. "You need to see this." Jack and Rachel hurried over, their expressions turning grave as they took in the scene. There were dozens of pods, each containing a person, or something resembling a person. Their features were distorted, their bodies twisted by unnatural growths and mutations. What did they do here?" Clara whispered, horror creeping into her voice. Rachel shook her head, her face pale. "They pushed too far. These people, they weren't just subjects, they were prototypes. Early attempts at adapting humans to survive Earth's new environment." Jack clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath his skin. "This is monstrous. They treated people like test subjects." Before anyone could respond, a loud clang echoed through the station. The group froze, their hearts pounding. The sound came again, closer this time. Metal scraping against metal. "Someone else is here," one of the guards hissed, raising his weapon. The tension in the air was palpable as they backed away from the pods, their eyes darting toward the shadows. Whatever, or whoever, was making noise. It wasn't friendly. And suddenly, the mission felt far more dangerous than they had anticipated. They hadn't come here just to uncover secrets. They had walked straight into a nightmare.